Ciao, buongiorno, io sono Ted, and that is all the Italian I know. Hasta lasagna, don't get any anya. What's going on, YouTube? My name is Ted, and welcome back to another episode of Cooking with Ted. Today, ooh baby, we are making lasagna Bolognese. This recipe is going to be using that same ragu Bolognese that I made in a previous video. If you want to link to that recipe, there's a link down below in the description. Speaking of previous videos, I post new videos every week, so, like, subscribe. Let's get started. I'm actually going to make a bechamel sauce. So the first thing we're going to do, hey, get that spoon out of there. And the ramekin. Thank you. Now, a basic bechamel has 3 ingredients: flour, butter, and milk. Now, I know what you're thinking. Hey, wait a minute. Bechamel is French. You shouldn't use a French sauce in an Italian dish. It's not going to be authentic.
Quiet. This is my video.
I'm glad that you brought that up, internet commenter. I dug some digging on the old Wikipedia and what'scookingamerica.net, and this is what I was able to find. With a lot of history from this time period, especially from cooking, there's kind of limited knowledge that we can draw on. In my opinion, I think a lot of people would just write down things, and if enough time passes, we read those things in the modern day and we say, well, this must be it. They wrote it down, so it must have been important. When in fact, they could have just been spouting nonsense and taking credit for things that they had no right to. Let's talk about the history of bechamel. French people attribute it to a chief steward for King Louis XIV. His name was Marquis Louis de Bechamel. But I did read a little blurb here saying that Marquis Louis de Bechamel kind of got roasted by another noble at court who was just like, wow, this guy is taking credit for this sauce that everyone's using. That's pretty cool. Some claim that bechamel sauce was actually invented in Italy sometime in the 14th century, and Queen Catherine de' Medici, who was an Italian-born queen of France, when she went to court in France, she brought her Italian cuisine with her servants and her cooks. So some actually think that this Italian influence is what brought bechamel to France sometime in the 1500s. At the end of the day, it's pretty unclear exactly where bechamel came from. Maybe Marquis Louis de Bechamel did invent it. Maybe he just slapped his name on something that the chefs that Queen Catherine de' Medici brought from Italy 200 years before he was walking around. If you ask people in Italy, they'll take credit for it. If you ask people in France, they'd take credit for it. Personally, I think that bechamel sauce was invented in an underground food lab by a time-traveling Guy Fieri. Love you, Guy. Thanks for doing the good work. But seriously, though, thank you so much, Wikipedia, and thank you so much for what'scookingamerica.net. Support the Wikimedia Foundation. All right, folks, let's make a bechamel. So you want to use equal parts flour and butter for your roux. Start off by melting your butter. For this, I'm using 5 tablespoons of butter and about 1/3 cup of all-purpose flour. Melt the butter first, and then add the flour. Once you add the flour, stir it around pretty vigorously. You don't want to just let it sit. Stir it so that it all incorporates, and you also want to cook it for about a minute or 2 just to make sure that distinct flour smell goes away. Now, we're going to gradually, and I mean gradually, add the milk. Just add a little bit at a time, stir, a little bit at a time, stir until you can start getting a more steady stream going in there. So you want to keep stirring and adding milk until it sort of forms a thick sauce. Now, this is a great place where you can add some aromatics. You can add bay leaves, maybe even add a little garlic, add some red onion, some parsley. I just added nutmeg. I could have easily added bay leaves, but again, I didn't have any. All right, so this is the part where I started improvising. I looked at this bechamel sauce and thought, I don't have nearly enough for a whole lasagna. It really only made about 1 cup of sauce. So I added these chunks of mozzarella, as you can see, and just kept stirring and stirring and stirring and stirring and stirring, and formed a pretty thick cheese sauce. Now, this is kind of a similar process that you would want to do if you were making mac and cheese. I'll be making macaroni and cheese in a future video. Like and subscribe. Now, I definitely should have grated it in retrospect, but for this, since I knew I was going to be putting it into a hot oven, I knew that cheese was going to melt anyway. I also did it this way because, honestly, I just didn't want to have to clean a box grater. Lazy? Yes. Efficient? No. So now the sauce is looking way too thick. It's like a thick paste. So then got a little nutty. I actually grabbed some white wine out of my fridge. Now this is the same white wine that I used to cook the Bolognese. Now if I had decided to add the wine earlier, that would have been a better idea, just to add the wine and the milk at the same time to the bechamel, and then maybe gradually add the cheese just to fold it in. It still ended up working here. I just gradually added wine stirred, until it became kind of like a sauce that I could work with and sort of pour out that would spread evenly. Now we're going to grease a pan with butter. Just take a tab of butter, wipe it around on that pan. I'm using a 9x13 Pyrex. This Pyrex I found at Target was like 10 bucks and it works like a dream. Okay, so now we're going to boil our pasta. Now for this I used De Cecco pasta. Is De Cecco absolutely necessary? No. I like De Cecco. Use whatever pasta you like. Again, this is not sponsored content. De Cecco, this is not sponsored content. Yet. All right, salt your water. Now for this, I decided at first to try using an ice bath just so that I didn't cook the lasagna noodles all the way through before I put them in the oven where they were going to cook again. In retrospect, the ice bath was unnecessary. It was an unnecessary step that just made the recipe more complicated. And if I were doing it again, I actually wouldn't use an ice bath. I would just cook the pasta and put it directly into the pan and just build from there. Maybe cook the pasta a few minutes below the recommended time, just until they're floppy. You don't want them to still be like rigid, but if they're still floppy and they can move around a bit, that's fine. Just put them in after that. So now we build. The first thing you're gonna wanna do is take a layer of your ragu bolognese and make sure it's nice and cold from the fridge so it doesn't spread very easily. I eventually turned on the burner just to make sure that the bolognese sauce would at least warm up a bit just to spread easier. I would recommend that as well. I would also recommend keeping the bechamel at least covered or over a very low flame just to make sure that it also spreads easier. You can see everything's a little too cold here as I'm building and it's not spreading as easily. So here's how the layers go. You got your buttered Pyrex, layer of ragu, layer of noodles, layer of ragu, layer of bechamel, Parmesan. Keep doing that until your pan is full. Okay, so once you've added all of the layers and your dish is looking full, top it with a full layer of Parmesan and put it into your oven at 375 degrees Fahrenheit for 35 to 40 minutes. When we moved into this apartment, the interior of the oven had not been cleaned, so we couldn't see anything through the front window. By turning the oven light on, it was just darkness. But I cleaned it, and now we can see things. Look at that. You can see this lasagna cooking. I didn't clean the front of the oven. Also, shout out to Barkeeper's Friend. Again, not sponsored content, but Barkeeper's Friend is awesome. It works to degrease so much stuff. It's great. Okay, so we're gonna take the lasagna out of the oven, and this is very important. Let it chill. Don't cut right into it. I let it chill for about half an hour. It's gonna be very hot when you take it out of the oven, but I also recommend letting it chill just to let everything kind of absorb back into the pasta and let it cool and let everything kind of meld together. The other thing is it's gonna be too hot to eat, so don't just like rip a piece off and just start going for it because it's gonna burn your mouth. Don't burn your mouth. So I let it sit for about half an hour and then it was time to cut into it, and oh my God, look at those layers. This lasagna turned out so well, even though the bechamel sauce did not go as expected. The white wine in there, the nutmeg in there, the ragu bolognese that had been sitting in the fridge for a day or two, everything really complemented one another to make a fantastic, fantastic lasagna. Ugh. If I could eat this for every meal, I would. And guess what? I did. It's gone. This lasagna is long gone. It lasted maybe like 2 days in our fridge. Make it for your loved ones. Make it for your liked ones. Make it for your hated ones. Change hate into love with lasagna. So that's my lasagna. Do you want to see me make something different instead of this lasagna? Too bad. This is my video. But if you want to see me make something new, or if you have a suggestion of something you'd like to see me make, drop a comment or drop me an email. If you drop me an email, keep in mind I might read your email in a future episode of Cooking with Ted. Folks, thanks again for watching. This has been Cooking with Ted. We'll see you next time. Lasagna. Nice.